an exciting one. This will be one that some of you guys probably won't like too much. Um, we're gonna take on diabetes. Diabetes is there's almost as much BS around diabetes as there is around cholesterol, which is amazing to me. Um, to me, again, diabetes looks like a good business model. Bad for human health, the current way that we're dealing with it, but it's a good business model. So let's get into that a little bit. Let's talk about that a little bit. What am I talking about? So, first of all, let me say this: I am not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. So, any advice or things that I may say over the course of this show, please check with your medical professional about if you decide to act on them. Um, some of what I'm going to tell you will literally fly in the face of medical science. This is my opinion based on my research. Okay, so let's just get that out of the way real quick. So again, if you don't like what I'm saying, turn it off. Okay, all right. So I'm going to talk about really, I need to start this somewhere. So we're going to talk about, again, three states of human function that a human can be in. Okay, so the first state, and again, I've been talking about this in the context of fasting and fed, but in starvation and all that kind of stuff, and that gets a little confusing. So we're gonna go with some new terms. Okay, so when you eat, and for 5 hours after you eat, you go into something we're going to call at New Pharma and here in Chip's world build mode. Okay, so we kind of curl up in a little ball and we build, right? So we're building cells, we're proliferating cells. So that means, if you need to make new ones, you're making new ones. We're repairing tissue, we're repairing damage to tissue in this mode. We're running for the most part on glucose. We certainly could be running on ketones during this time and should be running on ketones, but you will run on glucose. You are not running on dietary fats during this time. You're storing those and you're managing your fat stores. So when you eat, and if you eat more than 50 calories, so energy drink or a Coca-Cola or a Dr. Pepper will all qualify here as eating. If you drink that, screwdriver at noon, that's eating. Okay. If you drink alcohol, again, 50 calories, right? So anything that you do when you consume over 50 calories, you put your body in this mode. You do it to yourself. Okay. So you put your body in this mode. And in this mode, we're calling build mode. Again, you don't burn any fats. You're running on glucose or you're running on ketones, depending on kind of your overall status, let's say. But you're making cholesterol. So again, if people have high cholesterol, they're probably in this mode too much. I mean, it's probably just as simple as that. But you're making cholesterol so that you can break it down later into steroids and hormones. So, for the most part, all of our hormones come from cholesterol. Cholesterol is our master terpene, which is really cool. But anyway, we have that turned on in this build state, right? So in a lot of other things, cancer lives in the build state. Cancer can't really live in our burn or normal operation state as long as we stay in it long enough. But cancer lives in this state. A lot of diseases live in this state. Bacteria love this state because you've got a lot of glucose, circulating glucose running around. So we'll call that state build state, and we do it to ourselves, and it lasts 5 hours. Every time we eat, we go into it. So after that, after the 5 hours after we eat, we go more into a burn status or normal operations, what should be our normal operations, which now in literature is called fasting or starving, which is interesting. But this literally, if you look at physiology and how you work as a machine, this is our optimal mode. And we probably have a third gear we'll talk about in a second, but this is our optimal mode. So what happens in burn mode? Well, we stop using glucose as our primary fuel and we go to a 50 times more efficient fuel called dietary fats. We start using cholesterol, so we start breaking it down into hormones and things that we need. What else happens? All this good stuff happens. Literally, cancer can't, if you stay in this state long enough, you will burn through all your dietary glucose and you'll start running your water soluble organs on ketones, which is kind of a fat based sugar and it's way more efficient. You'll start running on ketones, and cancer can't eat ketones, boys and girls. 48 hours after you start a fast, again, cancer starts dying because it doesn't have anything to eat. I'll let that one sink in for a second. Yeah, so anyway, so in burn mode, in normal mode, we're way more efficient, we're healthier. Our cells do something called, our immune cells do something called autophagy, and they eat other cells. So like if we have a bunch of bacteria in us, whoop, 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 that's all going to get eaten up in burn mode. Now back to build mode for a second, what we do with cholesterol. The way I want you guys to start thinking about cholesterol is it's like if you're going to build a house, you need construction materials, right? Well, if you're going to build cells, you need construction materials. And cholesterol is like, wheelbarrows of goodness coming to your construction site to build stuff with. So you can think about it as wood and bricks and mortar, or however you want to think about it. But, wheelbarrows full, or when you're in build mode, right after you eat for 5 hours, you're taking wheelbarrows of stuff to the construction site. If you don't eat for 5 hours and you go into normal operation, which is burn mode, you start using those construction materials. So now I'm going to use them. I'm going to build stuff with them. I'm going to break them down. I'm going to build other molecules. I'm going to build other structures with these master precursors that I got when I was in build mode, so that I can burn them all and run and all that. Now, you can do that for 40 days. You can stay in normal operation for 40 days without starving or really having any harmful effects. You have to watch your fat balance, and again, there's ways to actually measure that. But go back, and if you're with me, go back and listen to the food addiction talk, because we're all pretty much right there. I'm right there with you guys. I'm trying to alter my behavior around the knowledge that we have here too. And Cindy and I have been pretty effective, excuse me, at doing that, and understanding kind of how to use these principles to alter our health. Now it's interesting, some of the things, sort of the consequences that happen, like, we quit eating meat, and you quit getting the antibiotics from meat when you quit eating meat, which is an interesting consequence that you have to account for. So again, you have to have some kind of herbal antibiotic or be taking one, or you're going to be overwhelmed with bacteria for a little while. So anyway, in burn mode, so that's where we want to be. That's normal operation. Again, diabetes doesn't really exist in burn mode, boys and girls. Diabetes exists in build mode. That's why I'm going through this for you, but we'll talk about that in detail here in a second. Okay, and so the last mode that we have, we'll call it woohoo mode for right now, because there's evidence that we can run this way. There's high evidence that we run this way, and it's based on a light code, okay? And you step down basically UVB radiation in a variety of different ways. We like vitamin D, you make vitamin D from UVB radiation and cholesterol. If you're not in the sunlight enough, you don't do that. Again, if you're behind glass, you don't do that. So anyway, we have this third mode, but we won't even talk about that yet, because all of us are stuck in kind of first gear here in build mode, and we need to really get out of that before we talk about what we could be. And what I'm talking about here is completely altering our function. Going from a plant in the dark to a plant in the light is sort of gear 1 to gear 2, and gosh, we can physically see what happens to a plant, when we move it from a dark, situation into the light, right? So that's literally what I'm talking about in our function. So I don't even know what 100% normal looks like. Like if all of us were running at 100% normal, would we have disease? Probably not the way we do now. Would we be suffering from things like COVID? Probably not. Now, gear three, I don't even have a clue, right? But I would guess that all kinds of, stuff that we sense and know that we're capable of, starts turning on in gear three. So there you go. So anyway, but we're going to talk about, again, that's human function for you. So you have three gears, which is really cool. And you have three different fuels that are indicative of that. And you have really three different metabolic states that dictate those, that are within your control. Gear one and gear two, you control by your eating behavior. Okay? So, important stuff. All right, so now let's get into the meat of the topic. So we spent, 10 minutes going over background. Sorry about that. If you've listened to all of these, you've heard that several times now. So hopefully it's sinking in, and I'll keep talking about it in different ways. But it's important always to lay the background for these talks, because the background is important, and that really, frankly, the talks don't make sense without any background. Again, so if you're on YouTube, you've seen what I've done. If you're listening out there on the podcast, I've just flipped to a computer screen and then me talking over the side. But we're going to talk about some things, and it's a little easier for me to kind of show folks, but also, you know me, I'm never going to leave you hanging with too few words, right? So, okay, all right. So the first thing that I want to talk about is so that we're going to get into diabetes now. So if you are out there and you have diabetes, listen up, perk them ears up. If you're out there, you have a family member who has diabetes, again, this is going to be super important information. Some of this will fly in the face of medical science, and I apologize about that. You can do your own research here, and I would encourage you to do so. Again, everything that I'm going to tell you is research backed, meaning that I can substantiate my claims, let's say, although I'm not making claims because I'm not a doctor. I'm just a guy giving you my opinion, but I can substantiate my opinions with research. Okay, so that's the big thing that you gotta know. So let's talk about diabetes, first of all, from the perspective of a test. So if you suspect that you might have diabetes and you go into a physician, and physicians do this regularly anyway, they'll run what they call A1C test on your HcA1C or HA1C. And what that stands for is it's a hemoglobin test. And what it's testing for is something called advanced glycated end products. Okay, so all that sounds super duper complicated. It's really not. So let me kind of break that down for you. So again, the test is testing for these advanced glycated end products, and it tests on blood hemoglobin, and the life of hemoglobin is 2 months or something like that, 3 months. I can't really remember. But, hemoglobin will pick up a certain amount of glucose and it'll become glycated, stuck. So the sugar will stick to your blood carriers. And basically the sugar will stick to your blood, and that will last, again, that blood molecule will last, I think, again, 2 to 3 months or something like that. So as an aggregate, they can look at that and just see how much circulating glucose that you have and whether that's too high or low. Okay, so that's kind of what the test does. Now, are there problems with that? Not if you're a closed loop, but you're not. You put stuff in your mouth, right? Do you eat glucose? How many here eat glucose? No one. Okay. You do, but you eat it in the form of fruit, or you eat it in the form of a vegetable, or you eat it in the form of a, carbohydrate, right? That's the way we get glucose. What happens if you eat dietary sugar, like fructose or galactose? Fructose, by the way, is in everything, any processed food. So just start reading labels. You'll go, holy cow, is Chip right? Fructose is in a lot of stuff. Galactose, this other sugar that I'm going to talk about, is mainly a milk sugar. So it's in milk. Ice cream would be the trifecta of horribleness in everything that I'm going to tell you here. So again, if you're going to eat ice cream, make your own. Make it from coconut milk and good things. Don't buy store-bought ice cream. That is this is death blossom. It literally is. So okay, so when you eat fructose, again, that's not glucose. Glucose. That's not glucose, but it's sugar, and it's going to glycate. It does glycate your hemoglobin. Well, does it do it in a higher percentage than glucose? Yeah, it does. In fact, galactose, I think, is around. So, glucose will glycate your hemoglobin at about 10%, I believe. Galactose is about twice as likely to glycate your hemoglobin, and fructose is about 3 times as likely to glycate your hemoglobin. So what is this? What are you telling me, Chip? What are you saying? That these sugars do the same thing as glucose in my blood? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I'm saying that they do it at a higher incidence. They do it a lot more frequently than glucose. And so when I'm measuring glycated end products, I'm not taking this into account in the current diabetic test. If you eat a lot of fructose and a lot of if you drink a lot of milk and eat a lot of fructose, and fructose is in everything, it's straight pancake syrup, literally, but you know, it's in a lot of stuff, right? So if you do that, you're going to be a false positive on an A1C test, meaning that those glycated products are forming glycated end products at a higher ratio than just glucose would. So hopefully that's making sense, but the A1C test is flawed. Everyone should understand that if you eat a lot of fructose or drink a lot of milk or eat a lot of fructose, that you're going to be falsely high on a diabetic test, okay? So you may not have diabetes or type 2, that you could be falsely high. You know, we need better indicators. And again, this is a similar thing to the cholesterol test. Again, just because you have high LDL does not mean there is certainly too high, but it's well over the limits that they, you know, prescribe now. But that doesn't necessarily, you know, again, you have high LDL right after you eat because you're moving cholesterol around. So you just have to understand how your body works. And these tests are just horribly flawed, but they fit a business model. If I knew you were, you know, if I'm an evil shitbag that, you know, runs pharma, and I knew that if just you eating fructose and galactose was going to cause false positives on my A1C test, am I going to say anything? I don't know, guys, but they ain't saying nothing, so that should tell you enough. And old Chip figured this out, so surely somebody else out there has figured this out. So point 1, A1C test is flawed. So, you know, if you test out high on an A1C test, and that it is an indicator that stuff's too high. Sorry, I seem to be cussing a lot today, but apologies to anyone if I've offended anyone. But stuff's too high, right? So again, it's a good indicator. Stuff's too high. Now I've got to take that to the next level. Well, what am I eating? If I'm eating a lot of fructose and drinking a lot of milk, okay, well, I need to kind of factor all that in some kind of math equation that doesn't exist yet. But I need to factor that in because it's a false reading. Okay? So hopefully everybody's getting that. Now, again, if I get you to read falsely positive on a test, what am I going to sell you? Yeah, insulin. Okay. What does insulin do? Well, first of all, you know, again, we'll do another one on signaling molecules that have to do with energy status and how you balance energy status. But balancing energy status is way more about when you eat, okay? So way more about the first things that we just talked about rather than insulin. What does insulin do? It helps cells suck all of the glucose out of your blood. Is that a good thing? It's a good thing if your body is regulating it because your body understands these checks and balances that your body has. Okay? And you're going to go, well, Chip, what you're telling me, I'm a diabetic. I mean, I have to have this insulin. We'll talk about that in a second because we'll talk about how behavior can cause a need for this. But I want to talk just about insulin for a second and what insulin does. So what insulin does will cause you to suck up all of the basically glucose that's in your blood system. So when you need, basically when you need energy, right, your pancreas is going to make beta cells, and in those beta cells, you're going to make basically insulin that'll allow you to pick up the glucose that's in your bloodstream. So it's just a mechanism that your body has to say, pew, turn on the energy, basically. So I have a high energy demand right now, because that's what you need glucose for. You don't need glucose for normal mode. You don't need glucose to run. If you're in normal mode and a bear comes up behind you, you need some freaking glucose because you need to run, okay? You need immediate, action, okay? So you do need some glucose. And again, we get glucose from carbohydrates, so fruits and vegetables, not from dietary sugars. Okay, all right, so enough. I got a little preachy there. All right, so insulin. So all insulin does is it helps you suck up the glucose in your blood. Now, let me ask you this. If you're awash in dietary sugar, and again, fructose is way more likely to hang around, galactose is way more likely to hang around in your body than glucose. So if you're awash in these dietary sugars, is it good for you to signal insulin to pick them all up in your cells? Do you think that potentially the inability to signal insulin is more a reaction to dietary sugars than it is to anything else, than something broken in you? Your body's rebelling against what you're putting in it. That's the problem. Dietary sugars are the problem. Dietary sugars cause diabetes. Dietary sugars cause insulin resistance and insulin insensitivity. In fact, I think I actually pulled that up. Yeah. Okay, so I've got a study up, and if anyone wants to access this, you can just access it by the title. The title of the study is Microtubules Negatively Regulate Insulin Secretion in Pancreatic B Cells. But basically what this is saying is that your pancreas senses your sugar status. It understands how much sugar you need, how much sugar, and again, you don't need a lot of sugar. We're supposed to run on dietary fats. If you're in gear one, if you've just eaten in for 5 hours, you need more sugar, and your pancreas has to understand this, right? And so what it does is it goes, oh, okay, we need more dietary sugar because you've just we need more insulin to pick up the glucose because you've just eaten and you need glucose, right? So that's when insulin gets produced, is when you need to pick up dietary sugar. If you don't need to pick up any dietary sugar, you will not produce any insulin. If you inject yourself with insulin past that, you'll pick up dietary sugar and you'll quit making, your B cells will go to sleep. They'll go to sleep. How do you recover from that? Well, we'll get to that in just a second. And again, this is where we get into some sensitive stuff, because it's, if you're a diabetic, you're told you can't fast, right? If you're a diabetic, you're told that putting you in ketosis will kill you. It'll put you in ketoacidosis. We're going to talk that through in a second. So I'm just going to give you some facts there. I'm not going to try to give you any advice. You can kind of go with that on your own, but I'm going to give you some facts and some things that happen and why ketoacidosis happens, okay? But the big point here is, again, if we're awash in dietary sugar, so if you're eating a lot of dietary sugar, what does that mean? Not fats. So we all kind of know. So let's just talk this through. That'd be easier. So fats are found in meat, and that's mainly saturated fat. And the thing that you have to recognize when you're eating meat is you're eating everything that meat ate. So if that meat came up in a feedlot, you're eating that. If that meat was raised in a beautiful ranch with, pasture-fed, wonderful, loving, people, you're eating that, okay? So you need to realize that and be intentional about the meat that you eat. But recognize that most of the meat that we eat is saturated fat, unless it's been really intentionally fed. The animal's been intentionally fed to model the fat for you, right? But for the most part, what we eat now is, meat-wise, is saturated and full of antibiotics and all kinds of crap. But we need saturated fat. So saturated fat is better from things like cacao, right? So from a plant, cacao has just about all the saturated fat that we need in it, and it's beautifully ratioed. If you look at, so what other kinds of fats that we need? Monounsaturated fats, so that's olive oil, cashews are higher in monounsaturated, almonds, lots of nuts and things like that. And then we need polys, omega-3 and omega-6. In our diet right now, we get way too much omega-6, so we really need to kick up the omega-3. But again, we can get all that from plants, okay? So we get all of those fats, or can get those fats from plants. So we can it's possible for us to configure our diet and configure our fat stores. We gotta have fat. And then we also have to have some dietary fiber. Well, what is that? Well, that's just plants. That's just vegetables and fruits. Vegetables and fruits contain dietary fiber, which good bacteria need and eat. And they also contain glucose and, chemical mediators that we need. So what I'm telling you is you can run on fats and fats and carbohydrates, sorry. And by carbohydrates, I mean like natural fruit and natural vegetables, nothing else. All this crap in our diet is killing us, okay? So if you eat a lot of dietary sugar or eat things with dietary, I like cookies, I have to fight myself. I have to fight my addiction to those things, right? And we all will have to do that in the future, whether you want to do that now or not, it's up to you. But we're all addicted to dietary sugar, and so we have to fight the cravings for that. But if you can do that, again, you're going to, just by doing that, if you're a diabetic or a type 2, if you can control your milk, dairy input, and your dietary sugars, you will heal yourself. You will begin to heal yourself, let's say. Your blood glucose levels will come down on their own. Your body is a fantastic machine. And your body is always trying to get to perfect. No matter how sick or broken you are, your body is always trying to get to perfect. Okay? So just, try it on your own, right? Just cut out dietary, it's hard, and milk, I understand that, but cut those out and watch your numbers go down. Let's talk about, so the way to heal yourself, and this is just bottom line, it doesn't matter if you're diabetic or not. The way to heal yourself from just about any disease is fast. Again, 40 days, you can go without food. You're not going to die. You need to drink water. You drink some lemon, and, basic tea and stuff like that, but no food, right? So, and you can do that for 40 days. So we all have this rebellion against that. No, I'll get hungry or whatever. No, you don't get hungry. Go read about accounts of people who've done it. You go through all kinds of emotional stuff because it's cleansing, but you really don't get hungry after the first 2 days. So if you're diabetic and you really want to heal yourself, fast. Now, here's the thing that you have to understand when you go read about this. If you're a hard diabetic, so if you're taking insulin every day and you're listening to this, listen to what I said about insulin and dietary sugar first of all, because cut out dietary sugar. That's what's causing your situation. But you're going to read a lot about ketoacidosis, right? So you'll read a lot about if I'm a diabetic and I go on a keto diet, I'm going to go into ketoacidosis. You will if you eat consistently. And what I mean by that is if I'm on a keto diet and I'm a diabetic and I eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I'll go into ketoacidosis, even if I'm eating a little bit. It's more about the frequency than what you're eating, okay? Because, again, your body goes through these different states. So when I eat, I'm in build mode, right? I'm in build mode. And when my body tries to go into ketosis and build mode, that causes something called oxidative stress and ketoacidosis, and it makes me sick, okay? So you have to understand how your body works before you go on this journey. So again, if you're a diabetic, a hard diabetic, and you're an insulin-taking diabetic, and you want to fast, again, feel free to call me. unless your physician is just really well read and again, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just, offering help. But unless your physician is really well read or current, he's going to, so no, don't fast. You'll go into ketoacidosis and it'll, hurt you, right? So that'll probably be the advice that you get from medical professionals. But I would encourage you to look at, again, if you fast, if you don't eat at all, ketoacidosis results from the keto diet and eating too frequently. So again, when you put your body into build mode, there's danger with a keto diet if you're diabetic. Okay, so that's the big warning signs, is just the frequency of eating. All right, so let's see, where are we gonna go? Yeah, stop eating all sugar. I think I said that. Okay, so, and again, if you are that hard insulin using diabetic, so ketosis will be your friend. What happens, let's just talk this through real quick. So it doesn't matter if you're diabetic or not. It doesn't matter, how sick you are. All of these things happen. And the reason I'm talking about fasting so much, or let's say staying in burn mode, so gear 2, let's say longer than 3 or 4 days, okay? So not eating for 3 or 4 days, but that puts us, 5 hours after we don't eat, we go into normal mode, and that puts us in normal mode for a good amount of time. Most of us don't stay in normal mode very long, if we even get there, because we eat and screw it up. But we can stay in normal mode for 40 days again. So you can be in this mode for a long, long, long time. But what happens with glucose? Well, if you're diabetic, glucose is your everything, right? So it's your be all, it's your end all, it is your everything, because you've been taught that you run on dietary glucose. Glucose. You can run on glucose. Every cell will run on glucose, but that's not your optimal state. That's build, right? We don't want to be in build. We want to be in normal. So how do you get there if you're diabetic? Again, so 24 to 48 hours after you start a fast, your body will burn through all of your stored or your circulating, let's say, glucose. So anything that you've got from foods or anything like that, gone. So now it is completely up to your body to regulate the glucose. And guess what happens? It does it. And again, it does it by breaking down triglycerides. You still have to go in an anabolic state at times, a kind of a build state, even though you haven't eaten. So certain muscles may need to repair. May have a little trauma that, infection or immune response or whatever. So micro things still have to go into that mode and still have to be able to do that without a lot of glucose. And so what happens, 24 to 48 hours, you burn through all this circulating glucose and you start generating ketones. Now, ketones replace glucose. The purpose of glucose is just a water-soluble fuel for cells, and all cells is kind of their default. So even bacteria will run on glucose, everything will run on glucose, but that's not optimal for you, right? So it is, build mode, but that's about it. So after 5 hours after eating, you start making ketones, but these increase, and after you burn through all your circulating glucose, which your body knows, that's why it's making ketones, and the ketones will peak in your bloodstream at, let's say 48 hours after your last meal. So they completely replace circulating glucose in your blood, and your liver and your brain and your kidneys start running more on ketones than they do on glucose. Now, if you want to see what happens when that happens, go look it up. But 10%. What is the saying that we used to all of us get? You only use 10% of your brain. Huh? What, isn't that a mystery? Didn't that baffle everyone? It's like, well, why? I mean, why would God's a good engineer? He's not going to give us a 10% useful part. There's got to be a way to activate that sucker. Maybe it's ketones and not glucose. If I run my brain on glucose, I'm about at 10%. If I kick her up to ketones, I go to 95%. Yeah. But most of us never try the experiment. because we like to eat our breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So anyway, there you go. Hopefully that's been helpful. This has been sponsored by Neighborhood Nutrition. We will be opening the Neighborhood Nutrition in Ada very soon. Again, if you have issues like this and you want help with your diet or help with supplements or advice, or we're gonna call what we're doing a clinic, but we're really gonna be doing exactly what we're doing now, talking to you about how you work and talking to you about how you can make yourself better, be the optimal you, so to speak. Thank you guys for listening to this version of Chip Talks. We'll see you next Friday, if not before. Next Friday, we're doing toxic breast implants discussion. Very important discussion. I don't know what percentage of women have breast implants. It's a lot. And you guys are all at risk. I mean, again, these are uncomfortable topics that no one wants to hear. But if you're in the middle of this, like if you're a diabetic, I hope, this has been useful information to you, and I hope that I've given you a new course of action as to how you can tackle your disease. That's what I want to do, and that's all I want. Provoke your thinking. Have you go research on your own, so there you go. Anyway,